Hi, I'm so happy that I have today our celebrity guest speaker, Jessica Southard from the Morongo Band of Mission Indians, because the Morongo Band's data management system for their air quality monitoring program is really comprehensive, and it's so good that I thought it would be useful to other tribes because it's a system that is well thought through, and they recently had an EPA TSA audit and they passed with flying colors. So that's a good indicator that they have some great ideas that would be helpful to you guys. So Jessica, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Melinda. So my name is Jessica Southard, and I'm with the Morongo Band of Mission Indians here in Southern California. And my actual title here is Administrative Assistant for the Environmental Protection Department, but I also act as our QA/QC officer for our environmental program. So I don't have the background of an environmental specialist. I don't have environmental knowledge per se. I've gained some while working here, but really my specialty is office. So I know how to do, the Excel and all of the programs and that type of thing. So that's why they brought me on board as an independent QA/QC officer for our tribal air program.
And that's a really big area where a lot of small agencies, not just tribes, struggle because you need to have somebody like you provide an independent QA function that has to be somebody other than the routine site operator. And that's really difficult or impossible for a lot of small agencies that might be just one person.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the tribes I've spoken to have told us that they've got just one person for their environmental department, or perhaps one person for their tribal air program. So I know it can be hard to find that independent QA/QC person. We just had our EPA TSA, and they came in and told us that they actually wanted us to have a third person, so we could have that separation between supervisor, field operator, and then QA/QC officer. So we did just hire a third person so that we could fill that additional role.
Wow.
But I know that that's not always feasible for every tribe.
And if you look at EPA's guidance material for ambient air quality monitoring, tribes can work together and they don't even have to have contiguous land. Jessica, would you like to start by telling us about the TSA? Like, how much notice did they give you and how did it go? How many days did it take?
Well, as far as how much notice, I can't speak exactly how much. It did go through our supervisor, our air program supervisor, Pam at City First. But the notice that I received for the data validation portion, I had about 3 months notice. So you do get quite a bit of notice, which gave me 3 months prep time. And then by the time they actually came, it was a 2-day audit. My portion of that, the data portion, was really only about a day. And we got through it pretty quickly. It didn't take nearly as long as I thought it was going to take. And I was kind of nervous for it being my first TSA, but it really was a lot easier than I thought it would be.
And how did you prepare for it?
So a lot of what they asked about for our data was just making sure that it was valid and legally defensible data. So they really wanted to know how we went about validating, especially those kind of outlier numbers or flag numbers that didn't seem like they would be accurate. Why did we allow them to go through, or why did we flag them with the qualifier that we did? So my big job was going through our whole process with them and showing them from start to finish how we go about gathering, processing, validating, and then submitting, and then making sure that those qualifiers that we put in were indeed accurate qualifiers. If you look at our data folder here, you may notice we've got it pretty well organized. It was pretty organized when I got to it here. I'm a stickler for organization, so I probably went in and made it a little more organized than what it was. But we have it broken down by particulate. We also have our reporting folder and our Tribal Data Toolbox folder. That's for our backups. We do a backup every time we go in and we do something new with it. So you can see we've got different folders for our raw data and our validated data. So if we go in and we open, for instance, our PM data folder, once we get in there, we've got it broken down by our 2000i data collector or our BAM 1020 data collector. So the one that I'm going to be showing you through is our BAM data. So if we go into that folder, again, we have it broken down by year. We get so much information and so much data that we really have to break it down this way just to keep it organized for ourselves. So if we go into our current year here, you can see we have all file, which is all information, all data from when we first started collecting until now, we have a spreadsheet that's just a continuous flow of data. After that, we've got our raw data. So this is where when we download it directly from the equipment, take it in raw form in CSV file, and when we open it up, it doesn't look a whole lot of anything usable. But we go ahead and open it up in Excel, and we play with the formatting so that we can get it into something that we can see. And then from there, we've created a raw data file that we don't play with other than just making it formatted for viewing purposes. So we always keep our raw data file because if something happened, we have that original data to fall back on, and we can show what the original data was and that we didn't go in and change anything in the data. The only thing we might change is we might add a qualifier, or we might void or null data that was no good due to whatever circumstances might have happened out there in the field. But we never alter any of the particulate results that come through. Okay. So we can show we've got our raw data. And then from there, we would then save it as a valid data file. So our other folders are going to look very similar. Our ESC would be our ESC logger, and that's where we're logging, that's the raw data for our ozone and our nitrogen dioxide. We're only regulatory right now on ozone, and EM 2.5, we're not regulatory on NO2 yet. We're working on it, and then we'll also be working on our NOx. So this is something really new that we just started after our EPA audit, after we got the green light from them to go ahead and start doing a digital logbook. I don't know if many of you are doing the actual written book where it's got the lines and they're very specific about how the pages have to be sewn in and how they have to be separated. And so it's a very specific way of doing it if you're doing it by hand. They're allowing us to take our template checklist that I utilize and turning that into a data logbook. So if you go back in our Tribal Air Program folder, we've got a folder called SOPs. This is where we keep all of our SOPs, many that they require us to have. But in my data and QA officer folder that I help manage here, we've got a data flowchart, which just goes through the process if you're more of a visual person on how that's going to happen. It's a flowchart to show you the process of how to go through that. And then we have our monthly data checklist, which corresponds to our flowchart. So if we open that up, you can see that it's got all of the information just kind of step by step. So you can see if we go through from step 11.1.1, dealing with the retrieval of our data. So all the 11.1s are retrieval. 11.2 would be validating, and 11.3 would be submitting. So our EPD SOP database, this is for all SOPs for environmental, but we do have it broken down by program. So for our Tribal Air Program, I actually have it all hyperlinked as well. So if you click on this, it'll take you directly to that Tribal Air Program folder that we looked at earlier.
Okay.
And it goes through all of our different SOPs for how to monitor and all of that. And if you scroll down to where we get to the 11s, we're looking at the 11s, that would be our data and QA portion. So if you look at that, again, hyperlinked again. So if I click on this link, it's going to take me directly to my data folder. And each of these is hyperlinked to their individual folders as well. So you can see here 11.1, we've got data collection. AMS would be air monitoring station for us. And if you go down to 11.2, that takes us to our data validation. So you can see that they all correlate with what's on the flowchart and what's on the checklist. That way, if I'm new at this or I forget, the steps of something, I can go easily find the SOP that's going to help me with that information. And then taking us through 11.3 is submitting the data. So the process to do that would be for us through Tribal Data Toolbox and then through the Exchange Network and then uploading it to AQS. We're utilizing an AMP 350 data report from AQS so that we can look at the information we've submitted and just kind of double check that what we submitted was indeed accurate. So even after we're submitting, we still have that opportunity to go back and correct anything that we might have been mistaken on.
It looks like what you've done is what's recommended for SOPs is make them short, which means that even if you are just monitoring for ozone, you still may have 12 SOPs or even more because that's just for one particular topic. So take us back to your checklist then.
So back to our checklist here. So now that you know that those numbers actually mean something, I actually print this out as a hard copy. The reason for that is that I don't finish all of my data validation in one day. What I do is I do a month's worth of data at a time. So for right now, I'm working on November 1st through November 30th, since we're past November 30th now. So I'll print one of these out, and I will go ahead and, as I'm working through the process, I'll handwrite the date in here. And that helps me know where I last stopped, so I don't lose my spot and do something again or miss something. And I also work on our BAM 1020, so we'll download it, and then I'll load it all to our BAM all files, so we have all of that information. Same thing with my ozone and NO2 data, it gets downloaded together. So after I've captured the data, that's step one. Step two would be validating it. And so this is just the way that made sense for me to go about making sure I've done all of my steps. But, I'm inputting all of the AMS log information. So that's anything that our operators did in the field. In my folder, there's a AMS log book, and that's where they can write down if they had any ozone zero span or monthly maintenance on the BAM 1020 or anything like that. They have a form that they're filling out, and it's got formulas in it that's telling me if it passed or failed the maintenance checks. So for right now, I'm taking a note of it that at, for instance, 3:42 p.m. on, Tuesday the 10th, they did a zero span, and it lasted them, 2 hours it took them to finish that zero span. So that way, when I go in and I look at the information on the 10th, and I see that there's this big spike that went up to 80 and it's unexplained, or it is explained, and I have that information, I've noted it down. Oh, that is what happened, that they were doing a zero span on it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. So after I've input all the AMS log information, I then compare. So I actually have email alerts sent to me from some local air organizations. I have South Coast Air Quality Monitoring District, and they would send me anything like, for instance, I got one today, and it's for a smoke alert because there's a fire that's in our nearby Los Angeles County. It hasn't quite affected us, but just in case it does blow through here with the Santa Ana winds that we're experiencing today, it could potentially reach us. And if our PM data is high, then that could explain that, and I would go ahead and find that qualifier for wildfire and put that in as an information qualifier as to why our PM seems exceptionally high today. Or, for instance, we're having a high wind, we're currently in a high wind alert, and I got that information from qweather.com. And they send me an alert whenever there's something that's going on. So, for instance, our wind advisory right now that's expected to last through Thursday, with wind up to 45 miles per hour, that could affect our PM as well. So I'm comparing those and, again, putting notes onto my spreadsheet at the dates and times that are noted on my emails, and then I can print those out for confirmation of why I use those qualifiers.
Now, with the ability to store everything electronically, it really is not like it takes up a lot of room if I save screenshots from the weather at the airport or whatever, just showing, oh, look, here's a screenshot. The peak came at the same time, and that gets saved then with that month of validated data. Is that kind of what you do?
So my spreadsheet is pretty in-depth, and it's got a few different tabs. One of my tabs is my ARB comparison, and that's Air Resource Board. So I'll go to the closest comparable air station to me. So for us, it would be the Banning Airport. It's really only about 5 miles away from our air station. It's the next city over. So that results that they are coming up with are going to be really close to ours because they're experiencing a lot of the same air conditions. So I'll go there and I'll download their information from the Banning Airport, and I'll stick their daily average and daily maximum for the month, and I'll copy and paste those onto this graph that I've got set up with a pivot table. So it's already ready for me to input their information, and it's actually already gathered my information off of my first page when I uploaded all of the raw data onto it, and then it's automatically graphing it for me and showing me, are my peaks the same as their peaks, are my lows the same as theirs, and if not, if I've got this outlier of this spike in data and they don't, well, then what happened? Is it because we had some monthly maintenance going on, or is it not? And so that's becomes up to me to become an investigator and find out, why did this spike up so high? Why was our PM 70 and theirs was only 24? That shouldn't be. So maybe we indeed did have something happen here, and then that takes you into all of the different possibilities. It could be that we really did experience something that they didn't. It could be that we had an equipment failure. It could be that we had a field operator failure. It could be that we had a failure on my part. Maybe I messed up a formula somehow. Or maybe it was Excel. Excel maybe messed up a formula somehow. So then I get to investigate and figure out if we're not comparable with them, why? So from there, there's some simple things that I'm checking. I'm checking to make sure I have the correct number of records. And so, did all of my hours come across basically? If I don't have, in a month of 30, if I don't have 720 fields, that means I didn't have all of my records and I need to go back in and figure out what hour am I missing. So I'll check that. And then I'm also checking any equipment flags. So did my equipment throw up any flags and say, oh, there was a disabled flag here, or there was a maintenance flag or an operator flag or something like that. So I'm checking for any of those and comparing them again against my AMS logbook notes that the field operators got an equipment flag and they didn't leave me something. That's going to prompt me to go in and talk to them and say, hey, why do we have an operator flag or a disabled flag but no notes? And then sometimes, oops, we forgot to make a logbook entry, or we really didn't do that. We have no idea what it's from. So then that prompts them to go investigate their equipment. So we're looking at those equipment flags. It's not necessarily going to pop up for me as something automatically, and I realized it later after I did a AMP 350 report. Hey, we had some stuck data for about a day and a half. It was at the result was at 7, and it stayed for a day and a half, but we didn't notice that because we were only looking for anything over 35. So I've got to set up to find anything that's been more than 5 hours at the same result value. So if it is, then it just prompts me to take a look at it. Maybe it's been 6 hours, and maybe that's okay. Maybe it really was a result of 7 for 6 hours, and that's okay. But then that's going to prompt me to look in case there was something that was a day and a half stuck at one number. Okay. So I'm checking that repetitive data. I'm also checking our high-low data, obviously. I want to know if it's over 35 on my PM 2.5 or if it's under 0, and it's also prompting me to look at our negatives. If we have too many negative results in 1 month, then it's time for our operator to go out there and do a background check on our BAM 1020. So that prompts me to say to them, hey, you had 18 negatives this month, might be time to do a background check. And obviously, if we have anything that's over 35, is it comparable with the local airport? Did I have any log notes referencing why it was over that? Any equipment maintenance we were doing or anything like that? A lot of times what we're finding is we're finding a trend late at night when nobody's here. So we know it's not our equipment operators, and we know that there's nothing that we're doing. So why at midnight are we experiencing these spikes? So it's kind of prompting us to look at that as well.
Why are you? What's happening?
We don't know yet. We don't know. We have suspicions that possibly a local quarry nearby might be powering on equipment late at night.
Oh.
So it's a suspicion right now, and it's just something we're kind of looking into, and we have to let the data go through because we don't have an explanation for why it's spiking so high in the middle of the night. But it's pretty consistent. So thankfully, our data is still consistent with the banning airports. Now, we're not looking at their hourly numbers. We don't know if they're spiking at midnight as well, but we do know that they're spiking on that same day.
Wow.
So we're assuming that their numbers are the same based on the fact that their spikes are the same day to day as ours are. From there, we move on to our high variances. So this is something that, again, was prompted after our TSA audit to add this section here. Again, I'm filtering out anything that's over 35, and I'm not, something's not over 35 and it's not going to pique my interest. But what I noticed when I went back and did our AMP 350 reports is that I was looking at the numbers and I was noticing there was these huge jumps and huge spikes in our numbers from hour to hour sometimes. And this is, again, we were looking at those like midnight hours, and we'd spike up, 15 points and then drop back down 12 points the next hour. So we had this 1 hour that was a spike of, 15 or something like that, and we couldn't really explain it. So we're looking for those high variances from hour to hour. Is it more than, for PM, we have it set at 10. If it's more than 10, it just makes us look at it, what happened. And so I'm not going to necessarily notice that if I'm just filtering out stuff that's over 35, because it could have jumped up to 29, from 12 to 29 and then back down to 14, and I wouldn't have caught that otherwise. And then making sure that I've taken all those things I just checked off, anything that was not within the parameters that I've set that are acceptable parameters, and I'm adding it to my flag data list. So I've got another tab on my fancy little spreadsheet. That's my flag data tab, and it's any of those things. So if it was not comparable with ARB, even if it was anything that was over 35, anything that was repetitive, anything that had a high variance, I'm adding it all to my flag data list. And then I'm going in and I'm putting information. So that's where these notes from the AMS logbook come into play. So if it was I've got a section that says, what was it? And so I'm going to say, well, it was my BAM monthly maintenance. And yes, I'm going to add the qualifier of BA for maintenance. Or maybe I don't want to validate it. Maybe it's no, but I do want to add a information qualifier. So it was IJ high wind day or something like that. For us, there's a lot of wildfires that happened out here. So that's going to be just information for them. We're letting this information go through because it was true PM data. This is really what happened, but we're letting you know why it really happened. There was the wildfire, and definitely we got a result of that from the smoke that came through.
So that's the AQS informational flag then that you add to that row of data.
Yeah, and what it also does is it's showing me all of those things, and if I have anything that didn't have an explanation next to it, but it was on my flag data list, why don't I have an explanation? I need to go do some research and again become an investigator and figure it out. And I need to go speak to my field operator. I need to speak to Pam, our supervisor, and ask some questions. And it may be there is no answer. It's just an outlier. So maybe it gets that qualifier where we're letting you know it's an outlier. We don't know what happened.
It's probably real.
Or it may just be high data. And then one of those things I'm putting in there is trending with the banning airport next to us. And so that's some information I'm putting in there too. I'm not disqualifying it. I am letting it go through. There's no qualifier code involved, but I acknowledge that for whatever reason we had a PM 2.5 F60 this day. So I'm just saying, letting you know that yes, it was trending with banning, even though it was not.
Okay, great.
My last step is that I'm going to review it with supervisor. So I'm emailing, copy a little screenshot, the ARB graph, all the flag data, anything that's questionable or any notes that I'm putting through. I'm sending it all over to her so that she can review it and again ask those questions if I don't have any explanations in the fields next to those flagged points and let her see what's going on. That way she has the opportunity to say, you know what, let's not disqualify that data point. It doesn't need to be disqualified. We should let it go through. Or maybe she has a better explanation for things that happen, even though I think that this is what happened because I got this alert saying that we had a fire and I'm thinking that this is what's really happening and we're comparing with banning, so I'm doing it. Maybe there was something that she knew that just didn't get put in the logbook. Maybe there was maintenance going on at that same time or something. So that gives her that opportunity to review it and kind of give me any additional information that we might need.
And she is the one who signs the data certification letter to EPA every year?
Yeah.
So she has the responsibility for the validity or invalidity of those judgments.
Exactly. So that's why it's important that I send it to her to review it every month so that she does have that opportunity to say, nope, this is not the proper code or the proper whatever we're going to put in. So she always has that opportunity to look it over, and that's important since she is responsible.
How long does this take you for a month of PM 2.5 BAM data, say?
I started November yesterday morning. I worked on multiple things throughout the day, not just that. I think overall it takes me roughly, to do this entire checklist, it's going to take me 2 to 3 days, just depending on how quick the information comes back to me that I'm looking for. Yeah, it doesn't take very long. For instance, the PM 2.5, from the time we download it and I go through all these checkpoints, it's just kind of all the in-between stuff. I had some questions yesterday regarding our November ozone data, and so when I sent over the review flag data to Pam, it had some questions on it, so I won't move forward until I get those questions answered. Because I want to make sure I'm putting in the proper qualifier code when I send it to AQS.
Cool. Could you show us where we are now on your flow chart?
Sure. This is my data flow chart, and you can see again we've got all those numbers that correlate to our SOP and the checklist that I'm working off. So right now, compared it to ARB, we validated everything. We've gotten all of our questions answered. We know what codes we want to be using, so we're going to workable file to then submit into our Tribal Data Toolbox.
And we have a whole course on that, so you don't need to go into detail with that. So then start when you get it out of Toolbox in the AQS formatted files.
The process after that is pretty simple. We upload it into Exchange Network. So if we go back into our data folder, so this is where our upload files are all being saved. These were my October ones. So they came in this format here. I saved them as a zip. So I've got my PM 2.5, I've got my ozone, and I've got my NO2. And also in another folder, I have my QA file for all of my ozone zero spans. So that also needs to be uploaded. So from this point, I'm taking these files and just uploading them directly into Exchange Network. After they've gone through that, I'll get an email letting me know that they've been accepted and that they're ready to now post to AQS. So then I'm going to log into AQS, and I'm going to go ahead and load each file. And thankfully, it stops me and gives me an error if there was anything wrong with my file, if it had wrong coding on it, or maybe I was trying to upload the same data point twice. It's going to stop me and let me know that.
Let's take a step back. And what message do you have for people who are just starting out?
Again, I came in this with very little knowledge of the AIR program or really anything environmental. The big, most important thing I would have to say would be organization. If you can keep your files organized and have everything tied up with a neat little bow at the end of every month and feel confident about the data you submitted every month, then when it comes time for your TSA, your audit, you're going to feel so much more confident about the data and about how that's going to go. I was a nervous wreck, my first one, and I thought, oh gosh, I'm just going to fail everything and I'm going to be the reason that we have a bad audit. And it turned out that our data was one of our best portions of our audit, and they were really impressed with it. Everything was so organized and had been validated. So I think and Pam, our AIR guru is what we call her here, the thing that she's drilled into me is legally defensible data. Your data has to be legally defensible, and it's not legally defensible if you didn't go through all the processes of the steps of validating. The checklist has been really, really helpful in making sure that I don't miss any steps and that I'm being consistent with hitting all of these points every month for each bullet.
And then the other big question that we need to talk about, although it's really pretty boring compared to data management, is in terms of the QAPP. So all the audits that I've ever been involved with is basically the auditor checks what is actually done in comparison to the documentation, including the QAPP. Can you talk a little bit about that and how they used your QAPP during the audit?
So they do. They definitely go through your QAPP step by step, and they want to know that you're following along with your own guidelines that you've set. They wanted to go through each SOP with us step by step. So you can imagine that was very time intensive, especially when you saw the list of SOPs that we have. So as far as the data portion of it, really making sure that what you've got in that SOP or in that QAPP is the process that you're going to use. And I know they go through it and they make sure that it's going to be a good process in the beginning, and they'll have you change it for sure. There's also a spreadsheet that they send over prior to the TSA that's basically your QAPP, and they're putting it in a different format, and they're asking you to answer all of these questions that should be all in your QAPP, and so they're making sure that you're just following through that whole process the same.
It does sound pretty nerve-wracking.
Yeah, it can be.
Go ahead.
Show you my binder?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yes, please.
This is my QA officer binder.
Okay.
So this is my binder here. Nobody else touches it. But in it, I've got a couple different sections. The first one is going to be my SOP section. And so back here, I've got every SOP that we're going to be dealing with here.
There you go.
And they're all outlined. So again, by all those numbers that we've got on that table of contents, so they're all outlined here, and you can see that table of contents right there. That's specifically for the AIR program.
Wow.
So when he came through and he looked at my data folder, he saw that I had all of these right here at a moment's notice whenever I needed them. But also in this folder is what I call my working data, and this is going to be my 1 year's worth of data. So for anything that I've been doing since the last TSA. So just had our TSA for 2015 and 16, and so I'm working on 2017. So that's all in here in the same folder. And in each month, I've got a nifty little tab that's got my month tab in it. And you can see I've got my checklist right here. And again, I've been dating it so this is November, so I'm currently working on right now. And I've been dating it as I've been accomplishing those steps, checking them off, as you can see. And then behind that, so this is just one tab with my month, but behind that I've got those printed out flag data lists that we talked about. And on it, you can see the graphs that I compared the daily average and the daily maximum to the airport. And then it's got all that flagged information down there, and you can see I've got my notes next to it as to what caused it to that high or whatever it was. So it's all right there in a neat little package for them when they come and do the TSA. I can pull it out and just say right away, well, I know exactly what happened in that month. It's right here in front of me.
Awesome.
So that was really, really helpful. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and we are going to be talking with you again